Welcome back to Season 1 of Amidst the Ordinary. Today we're going to dive into our fourth community principle, which centers around the idea of time and living unhurried. I think this theme may be one of the hardest to implement in our busy, fast-paced world, but I think it's the one we can all admit that we need. So, let's jump in.
There's this old saying, and I'm sure it's not that old, but it's something that tons of people know and have heard. If you want to do anything of significance or anything of good quality, it's going to take twice as long than you expected, and it's going to cost twice as much. And that is significantly truer when you find yourself trying to make a long-lasting impact in a community.
As humans, time is at the very center of our existence.
Sometimes we want it to speed up, get to the next seasons of our life, or just the end of a long workday.
And other times we practically beg it to stop. Maybe we're watching our kids grow up, or a precious moment passes us by.
However we feel about time, one thing is for sure: connections take time.
Today we're going to talk about all things time, how time intersects with culture, what it means to live unhurried, and the importance of perseverance in the long haul of building connections.
Our first story takes us to the small town of Hogansville in Georgia, where Jake's role as a mayor has taught him about all of this firsthand.
The thing about community is it's dirty because it's about people, right? It's if all I care about is making my business successful, I can do that relatively easy. I can make shifts. I can kind of make changes in order to reach my target audience. And if I don't really care about the success of the people around me, well, then it's not really about community, right? It's just about me making my business successful. But when it comes to being the individuals that are really trying to intentionally build community, it's about people. And people are messy. People are ugly. People are mean. People are hateful, And one of the things I realized early on is that time is one of the most valuable aspects that you can give people as it pertains to relationships. There's this old saying, and I'm sure it's not that old, but it's something that tons of people know and have heard. If you want to do anything of significance or anything of good quality, it's going to take twice as long than you expected, and it's going to cost twice as much. And that is significantly truer when you find yourself trying to make a long-lasting impact in a community. And so even if we had really good ideas, and even if we had really good intentions, if we had not been here long enough, or if we had not spent the time with the people here, it didn't really matter what we were saying or what we were trying to do. Meaning, I've spent enough time with you, and I've spent enough hours building a relationship with you, and gives me the opportunity to ask you to trust me, and vice versa. And so and what that looks like on a practical sense is if I come here and I'm saying, hey, my name's so-and-so, no one knows who I am, but I'm going to change this, this, and this. Well, nobody's going to want to talk to me. And so the time that it takes to specifically to build that relational equity, I think is I've found to be one of the most important things.
You may not need relational equity to pass laws or build infrastructures like Jake does, but the way you connect with others matters. As image bearers and children of God, we have a responsibility to represent Him well in the way we live and show up in our communities. We have an invitation to bring a glimpse of His kingdom into our spheres, and you don't have to be a mayor to do that.
Just take you and Allie's story, for example. The way you guys cultivated and invested in your community in the Netherlands made an undeniable kingdom impact. So let's hear a bit of your story.
I honestly did think that we would see a lot more change with a lot more people in the neighborhood on a much faster scale. Like I was like, surely we'll have like, I don't know, 500 people impacted within 2 years if we all put our hand to the plow. But that was very, in my mind, also very activity focused, a pool of activities. And it's just not how it works. People come with different histories, different stories, different dynamics. It just takes time. And I think if you invest really well in just a few, those will also then have energy to invest in few. And that is actually how the growth will happen. But that is a bit of an exponential growth where you won't see much in the beginning. And you need to be completely okay with that.
Yeah, I remember one of my most beautiful relationships that came out of my time in Taste was I was going to the supermarket. And I was feeling a bit stretched for time. But I met this Moroccan lady and I was pregnant. She was pregnant. We looked about like the same length of time through our pregnancy. And I just felt like God saying, you need to speak to her. And we did. And it started a really beautiful relationship. And it didn't last years because she moved later on, but the time that we had, the kind of 1.5 years, 2 years that we had was really beautiful. We visited each other in our houses, but it's maybe because I listened to the Holy Spirit and took that moment to meet her in the first place. Because if I hadn't done that, the rest wouldn't have come.
If you invest really well in just a few, those will also then have energy to invest in few. And that is actually how the growth will happen. But that is a bit of an exponential growth where you won't see much in the beginning, and you need to be completely okay with that.
And some stories you'll never see, some impacts you'll never see or hear about.
And then there's even the relationships where you give it a shot and it really doesn't work. Sometimes we have the urge to rush, to hurry.
But Jesus' pace is so much slower than ours.
He isn't asking us for quick results or speedy connections. Rather, we have the invitation to slow down, to invest in those around us truly and deeply.
And often that means we have to create space to do that. We have to build our lives in a way that create margin for connections.
I remember like when people wanted to move into our neighborhood to join our community, we would have to sit down with them like, hey, look at your agenda. In our culture and context in the Netherlands, people are just so busy. They've got work, they play sports, they have to visit the birthdays of everybody in their family, and then within no time, all their time is spent. Their agendas are super full. And that is where we always said, you need to make some choices here. You cannot move in here and already have all your time given away to other things. If you want to connect with a community, you will have to create space that you have not filled in and you can't fill it in. You just need to build margin in your agenda.
Because one thing that we often found was that people in the neighborhood, they would come spontaneous.
I don't know. Your language.
My language. They would be spontaneous about when they come. We would have people come at 10 at night sometimes. Or you'd have someone that would come in the middle of the day when you were doing something else. But if you don't have time...
Yeah, if you never have time for that, then it's not going to work. Of course, you can say like, hey, this is not a great moment, but what about tonight? But then also, like in the neighborhood where we live, everything is done by foot or by bike. So you'd go to the supermarket and you'd meet somebody. But if you're always in a rush because you need to go to the next thing, or you've already given away so much through all your other things you do that you actually don't feel you got a margin to talk to somebody at that point, like never, sometimes it's fine, but never, then that doesn't work. So you need to create sufficient margin in your life and how you spend your time. And that's hard because that's always that is going against the current, because there's always this demand on our time, right? As you have to be you have to push against that. And again, that's really hard on your own, because it's really what at least our society in the West pushes you. You need to be busy. And to not be completely busy it almost feels like you're doing something wrong, as where that is the most beautiful gift you can give to a community, as that will create time and you can stop and have true attention for people out of the fact that you've really got some energy and time left to give to them. There are no shortcuts that just don't exist. It takes time, it takes patience.
It takes some sacrifice too. We found that once you really got kind of entrenched with building relationships with people in our local neighborhood, some of our older friendships, we didn't invest as much time in those. It's simply because you have so much time in a day and your priorities shift slightly, and so that is a kind of almost a sacrifice that you sometimes need to make to shift kind of where your time goes.
And there's only so many really deep relationships you can have, and that's actually different per person. There's time for yourself and for your family, and time you spend with God or some of your hobbies, and then the latter you can maybe combine with others, but then also it just takes, of course, time to get to know people, understand who they are, their dynamics. That's just normal. You need to hang out with people.
John Mark Comer said it really well in his book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. Love takes time. Hurry doesn't have it. It kills joy, gratitude, appreciation. People in a rush don't have time to enter the goodness of a moment.
Yeah, there ought to be something different about the way we live, the way we show up in our communities and engage with those around us. That was certainly true of Jesus.
Jesus lived intentionally and gave his time freely. It's easy to want to hold on to our time and get frustrated when someone takes too much of it. For Chris and Judy, their new life in the Middle East is teaching them how different cultures view time and what it means to just go with the flow.
Late for everything.
I really don't like that, to be honest.
Like the time that I'm supposed to be somewhere is the time I leave home. But that's because the ladies that I deal with on a daily basis, that's the culture. So if I invite them, so once a month, I have them over at my home on a Thursday. We have a ladies' day here, so I invite everybody over. I will say to them it starts at 11, knowing that they're going to get here at 12:31. That's the time. But if I make it at 12:31, they're going to get here at 2:30, So I've kind of fallen into that, but it's become a big joke at the moment between our friendships, because they already know when sometimes I get there after them. And then they'll message me and say, okay, you want Arab time? And I'm like, yeah, just leave. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, that's something I needed to get used to, because I love to be on time. So for me, it's so hard also within the culture.
Because Chris's culture at work, like he starts at 7, he has to be there at 5 to 7, so...
So in some ways, there's still the rigidity of what normal work life looks like. In other ways, you also find that within the culture, somebody will say that we'll meet at 12, but they'd get there at 12:15, and they wouldn't apologize because there's something in the Middle Eastern culture that's like flexible time. So time is fluid. You can sort of get, if it's 12, you can get there at 15 minutes later and it's not even an issue. You don't have to apologize because, hey, I'm still on time, basically. And then if I think about my friends that are, Dutch or German, if they're 1 minute late, then they'll text you already. So it's very different.
Showing up well in the culture you find yourself in doesn't mean you have to lose yourself. On the contrary, when you honor someone's culture and show up authentically, you'll watch all the walls start to fall. Lean into the nuances of the culture around you, learning what's normal, learning the language, greeting people with sincerity, and be willing to be corrected.
Yeah, and at the same time, also be willing to bring yourself, your authenticity and passions, your heart, your personality, your skills and experiences. Bring the things that make you unique, that make you human.
For Sage and Samuel in Guatemala, building connections and caring for their neighbors in their new neighborhood hasn't always been easy, but their willingness to build bridges has made an impact.
The owner before, he had left a gutter unrepaired and stuff like that, which went on the neighbor's side, and there was this bush in the front that was never cut for that half year, and there were other things and she was just kind of demanding it to happen now. Now I felt like now there's this white gringo in the house, so now we can get what we want. With the guy before we couldn't, but now we get what we want and we do it, we demand it. The way she approached me was hurtful, I felt very pushed. I hate to be pushed around, to feel controlled. And I decided for myself to really approach her always in a nice tone, friendly way, but in a clear way, so to say, to really, and Sage heard me many times giving these voice messages, on WhatsApp, and just saying, the gutter will be repaired. Just give me a little time. I can fix down under the gutter. I can fix something to make it not go into your property. But more I can't do right now. We got to wait till we repair. But I showed her I care for these problems, these issues. And then there came one thing after another, Then there was a window in the wall that shouldn't look to her property, and said, we're going to fix that as soon, we will not take your privacy away from you. Don't worry, At some point I had emotions I just want to sit, why have I ever bought this house without talking to the neighbors, And I continued cursing God for that woman, not her. And then just, holding my ground a little bit in a nice way, in a kind way, and then, but trying to care, even though my heart felt like I just want to get out of here and never see her again. And now over time, I have to say, she's kind. She tells me if there's an issue. There was an issue a week ago with some wind banging on a metal, and I just said, I'm sorry, you couldn't sleep at night, so I'm going to fix this. Just show me where it is, and she showed me, and it was all just a kind interaction. And I was not in no way hurt or annoyed or felt controlled. She was just kind, The problem got solved as always. So she really saw too that she can trust me. Sometimes now it's with our newborn daughter, I brought her for conversations about stuff because they love babies, and it's gonna be absolutely peaceful when you bring a baby along to a conversation about a conflict or about an issue at the house, so, and that was really good. It's a good weapon of peace.
I tried to do a women's group here for a while, so kind of a little bit more kind of an organized time together where we would share food and share what's on our hearts and kind of sing and pray, and it was really good for a while, and then our sense of time is really different, and so the women would show up, they would tell me, yeah, they're coming, so I prepare stuff, and then maybe it was just these immediate neighbors, so 4 women. So maybe 3 of them would come 45 minutes late. So it'd be me and 1 woman and my control started coming out so loud, and the resentment. And so you can imagine leading a group about, trying to connect with God. It's very difficult then when my primary emotion was resentment and control. And so eventually I had to just disband that group because I was becoming someone that I didn't want to. And I was, those relationships were suffering. And so I just said, we're going to go on a break here. And then I think just through like these just different moments where life was just hitting me hard, I would just go to these women and kind of fall apart with them and on them sometimes. And through that, you know, me just being vulnerable rather than being the one like coming in, leading them, we were able to connect in a way that allowed me to experience God's presence here. And then I think for them to grow that trust with me. And now, like one of them in particular, like whenever I need to pray about something or if she's having a hard time, we can get together and we can really support each other. And I really feel like she's my friend. And it just took much longer than I thought. And it came about in a really different way.
Recognizing your boundaries is so important. For Sage, her willingness to do something that was causing her to grow resentful of those she cared for opened up the door for God to do something way more in those relationships.
God often shows up in our vulnerability when we have come to the end of ourselves. That was true in her circumstance, and it's often true for us too. So let's invite the rest of our team into this conversation now.
So this was the episode I was looking forward to.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because I am a little activity driven. So the idea of creating intentional time is a challenge for me. Yeah. Except when I make community a goal. So almost literally knowing it's part of what I spend my time on.
Yeah.
So when I notice my agenda gets too full, then that's where I notice that I need to change something. Yeah. And just that it goes slow. I'd like to go things fast, and I loved what Jake said about, hey, it probably takes twice as long.
Yeah.
And twice the effort too, because then it will be really good.
Yeah. I liked a quote that actually you said.
Oh,
so
nice.
bouncing off of what you just said.
Yeah, bring it on.
You were talking about how like you guys invested in a few people who then will invest in a few people who will then invest in a few people. I loved like the idea of that ripple effect.
Yeah.
And yes, investing in people takes time, but then also the reality that the investing that I'm making is not only this one interaction or this one connection, but it's going to like ripple out.
Yep.
And so there was a quote that I read that I actually think like Jonathan, our co-founder, may have written in a blog that's like the arc of God's story is bigger than your individual contribution.
Yeah.
And so I think when I think about time, I think I'm in such a hurry because like I don't like, I just want to make an impact and I want my life to matter. And so I need to be intentional with all my moments. And that's true. But also realizing like there's so much freedom and like the world's bigger than just me and just my interactions and just like God's doing so much more. And my interactions will have a ripple. Like the people I invest in will invest in a lot.
That's so relieving to hear, and almost that we're basically being told to slow down and to be more intentional with our time. It's very countercultural, but I think that's exactly what our souls like want to hear, is that it's okay for us to slow down, to say no to things so that we can say a deeper yes to other things.
Yeah. I know, because I forgot who it was that mentioned it, but they also mentioned that how like we as individuals, we feel that we need to be busy, we need to be doing something, we need to be active and moving and working in all these different aspects, but that's not necessarily always the point or the purpose of our day-to-day interactions and lives. So when we take that time to just step away and step back and we truly slow down, we get to see the different things that we probably would have missed if we're in a hurry and we're just trying to move along. Yeah. You get to, I guess, how people say like slow down and smell the grass and different things
Yes,
like that.
yes.
In a sense, it's similar to that, like just slowing down and just observing the different environment aspects that you are a part of.
Yep.
So yeah.
And I would much rather be known as someone who makes everyone feel valuable and that I will stop what I'm doing to talk to someone and really listen to what they have to say than be known as someone who was a part of many things.
Yeah.
Making time for somebody is one of the greatest gifts
Yeah.
you can give them. Like we all remember people that actually stopped and showed a real interest and made time. I remember all of those people and they're precious on the timeline of my life.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah, and even when I think of like the life of Jesus, he knew what it meant to be busy. Like everyone wanted 5 minutes with the Messiah, like whether they loved him or hated him.
And he was on a mission.
Yeah, he had a purpose, and then everyone else was also like, hey, I have these needs, I have whatever. And so like he knew what it meant to be busy.
Yeah.
But you just like read the stories of how intentional he was, and he was someone who was so attentive.
Yeah.
And like he stopped and he would pause a crowd for one person who touched the hem of his garment. Like that's crazy. And like how do we implement that same rhythm in our lives? I think that's something that I'm so challenged by, because I'm like, oh, my schedule is so full. But so was his. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well,
yeah. Doesn't make it easy.
Man, I got shocked when Kara said it took 4 years. But then the beauty of that, right? People were observing them, and that is really true. If you go somewhere new, don't think you're anonymous. People are seeing you, and that's fine. And it comes back to what we said earlier. We were a testimony of our lives. What was it? Come on, we had this episode. It was in the first episode we talked about that.
They're like listening with our lives?
Yeah, listening to our lives.
Okay.
So they are listening to our lives.
Yeah, that's true.
I love, again, you know, it's always both ways, because it's with, not so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people notice, and then it went quick after that. It's also you said, because like they already knew so much about us, which is probably true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Darian, you love that quote with that community was dirty.
Yes.
Yeah, come on.
Ava's like, talk.
I really appreciate the quote that was more towards the beginning of the episode, is how like community is dirty because it's about people. Yeah. And if you're not willing to get dirty and down with the people, you're not really going to be in community with them in its fullest. Yeah. So like that moment when you step into that atmosphere and that environment where you're like, I want to do life with you. I want you to be a part of my community, and I want to be a part of your community. This is about you, so I'm going to get down in the dirt with you, and we're going to walk this thing out together. And that's what's so beautiful about community, whether it's at church, at home, or school, whatever you establish that community. It's about doing it with another person and doing it with a purpose.
Yeah. I also loved what Judy said. So, especially if you move to like another country, another culture, to actually find out how time works for them.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal, and she had to figure that out almost to the extreme where they were like, "Oh, whoa, you're on Arab time." But that really makes sense, because I come from a very time-conscious culture, and I've noticed that here in the south of the U.S., it's not as punctual as where I'm from, and so you need to listen to that and adapt to that, because otherwise you won't connect in the same way.
Yeah. It also comes around to, we talked about it in one of the episodes, like honoring people. And so someone feels honored when you took the time to be on time, or to be on time. You know what I mean? To not be awkwardly there like an hour early when you're on time or whatever, like understanding. Yeah. I guess just lastly, let's make it practical. What are some next steps of ways that we can, get down and dirty with the messy people around us?
There was one other quote that was in the episode as well. And time is a valuable asset to give someone. And honestly, that's the one example for me, is like just continue to give my time to those around me and just showing up in a sense. In whichever way I said I'm going to show up. If I said I'm going to show up, I'm going to show up, and I'm going to be there with them, full undivided attention. And I feel like that's one practical way that I could do it moving forward with the different people in my life.
Yeah.
I think for me, I work from home as well, and there's one coffee shop that I go to all the time, and I think building in the margin to talk to people, because at this point, like, I know a lot of the people who are there, and I usually don't make time to talk to them because I'm there to do my work. But building in the margin to really be able to talk to people, ask how they're doing, and build community in that way.
Yeah.
I was thinking if time is a gift to somebody, then I want to go home and think like, okay, what person in my community that I don't know very well can I give that gift? And maybe, let's see what that looks like. But thinking of one of my neighbors, he spends a lot of time outside, so maybe I should create a bit of time to go up there and be curious about who he is and learn.
Yeah, I really like that.
Slowing down really is so countercultural. And as we discuss in our next episode, taking time to be with people is vital when it comes to building lasting connections. Go deeper into this idea and others by signing up for a free 10-day devotional linked in the podcast notes or on our website, scatterglobal.com.
Music for this podcast was provided by Zach Winters from his new album, Shade of Indigo, which you can stream everywhere. You can find more about Zach and his music and poetry at zachwinters.com. This podcast was produced by Pete Hicks and the Mycelium Collective in partnership with Scatter Global. Concept and design for this podcast by Peter Jan Rodenberg, Alyssa Valentine, Kristen Boyd, Ewout Van Oosten, and Pete Hicks, and recording engineering help from Doug Donick.